Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bass, and today we're doing another gear review. We're covering everything from swim baits to rods and reels to hard baits and soft baits. Let's go. I love experimenting with new tackle. It doesn't matter if it's high-end rods and reels, budget gear, little Ned baits, swim baits. It truly does not matter to me. I just love experimenting with tackle. I love going out, buying up all the new stuff, and then just pouring time into it, right? Taking it out on the water, figuring out what looks good, what looks like trash, what's actually catching fish, what fooled me and what is fooling fish, right? And really dialing that in. It's one of my passions. I love it. So these videos, these gear reviews, are the culmination of all of that. All the tackle buying, all the time on the water, all the experimenting. And then we bring all that together and we bring you the best of the best to save you time and money and to justify our own tackle addictions, right? That is a part of it too. I love this stuff. So today we've got one rod, we've got one reel, crankbaits, swim baits, spybait, and a variety of soft plastics, both finesse stuff and larger offerings. We've got some really good stuff to cover here today. Let's start with the bigger gear, and then we'll go hard baits and then end with soft baits. First up, this is the new Shimano Sahara, the Sahara FJ. Let me back up from just this reel specifically and just talk about this entire price point, because this reel comes in at $84.99. When Tactical got started, and even up to just a few years ago, we drew this line in the sand and said, if we're going to talk about gear, it's going to be $100 or more. $100 rod, $100 reel. That's not because we were tackle snobs or tackle junkies or anything else. It is because at the time, that was the magical line. If you bought gear $100 and up, companies had really invested in that gear. They'd done a ton of R&D, they were bringing new technology, and that gear was solid. There were huge advancements in the tackle as you made jumps from there up in price, and the stuff was very reliable. Below $100, it was like they just let that stuff go. Some of it was good, some of it wasn't, but you were really gambling if you were spending less than $100 on a rod or a reel. Well, that has changed, and you guys know that. For the last, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, our gear reviews in the fall, our big gear review series, we go all the way down to about the $49 mark with rods and reels. And the reason why is that the industry changed. All the big companies decided that they wanted to pour money, time, effort into more of that budget gear. And I'm so glad they did, because the gear that you can get now, like the Sahara FJ at $84.99, this is higher end than the high-end gear I used to fish with. When I was growing up, my dad had high-end gear. I had some budget stuff, but he had some really nice gear that I would get to use once in a while. The modern stuff is so much smoother, so much tighter, so much lighter. It's incredible. So let's go back to this reel. $84.99. I keep hanging up on that because I'm blown away. They've completely redone the reel. It's a completely different body than the previous generation. The biggest thing to me is that they lightened it up. That is the one thing about budget tackle still, is that it's still relatively heavy. That's how they save a lot of money. But they did a good job of lightening up this reel. They just took a little bit more out and got that weight down. So it's very comfortable in the hand. It's comfortable to fish with. And then there's been a major trickle down of technology. I mean, you're talking about, some of this is just like their techie names for stuff, but Hagane main gear in there. X-Ship, which is basically that it's extremely balanced. You've got a few different things, silent drive, but they're technologies that were in some of their high-end reels, and that in just a few short years is trickling down into more of the budget-minded stuff, and that is amazing. So in the past, I would have drawn the line up above this reel, and now it's absolutely in there. In fact, I scooped up the 1000 size, that's this one, and also a little tiny 500 size to put on a little bluegill and trout rod so that my daughter and I could go out and chase fish together with that little tiny reel and just have a blast. They're really, really nice reels. Next up, Dobyns rods. They just came out with the Maverick series. Now, we all already know that Dobyns does an amazing job at those lower price point rods, right? The Fury is one of the best selling budget type rods on the market, but Fury went up in price a few years ago as they put more tech into them. So the Maverick line is coming back in and landing right between Fury and Colt. And I don't really need to say much more about it. I mean, other than the fact that they feel exactly where they should be. I mean, they are a step up from Colt. They're extremely nice. They're 99 bucks. The colors match up well. So they did reels too. So they've got their own reels now. I have not played with the reels. I'll be honest with you. I love Dobyns rods. I have no idea about the reels. Haven't even seen them in person, but I know that in general, when companies jump into reels, I give it some time myself. No question on rods, however. I was really excited about this rod. I think they did a great job, and down the road somewhere, we'll circle back on reels. It just takes time to play with all the gear, right? But they've done a great job of inserting a line of rods, inserting a line of rods right back at that magical $100 mark. I think they did a really good job with that one. Now, let's go hard baits. We'll go here first. 13 Fishing came out with the Jabberjaw a couple of years ago. If you're not familiar, it's a bait with a free floating lip on it. It's almost a cross between a square bill and a chatterbait. A very unique bait, unique hunting action, a unique thumping sound coming out of the bait itself. Because the bait itself is silent, but you add the thump of that lip in there and you get a deep thud. Really a unique bait. Well, they just came out with the Jabberjaw Deep. So bigger bill, they say it runs 7 to 9 foot. That seems to be about right. Now, of course, you can play with that. If you don't want it to go that deep, you go to lighter or to heavier line. That'll keep it up. If you want to really get down and hold those deeper depths, you go to lighter line. But overall, great design. They used a really good snap. They used excellent hardware straight out of the box. You don't need to change hooks. Just a great all-around bait. So the Jabberjaw was already a proven design, and they just made a deeper version of it that is worth a look. Now this is kind of a big category. Shimano jumped into baits in the US market heavy earlier this year. We talked about the World Minnow, the World Diver Jerk baits, the World Popper. I mean, they've gone heavy into baits. They also brought over some of the JDM stuff. So over in the Japanese market, they've had the Macbeth baits for a while, but they just brought them over to the US, and it's an entire line, and they adapted them for the US market. Some really cool colors, really cool designs. So they go from, it's a whole run of baits, and I didn't even grab all of them, but from the big guy, there's a mid-size, couple of, now these two are the same size, but this is a traditional square bill. This is the shallow, really shallow, mind you. That is a winner. And then their flat side, which I have crushed them on in recent weeks. Absolutely crushed them on it. And then their little guy. I have this one tied on because fish keep blowing up out here behind us, and I keep firing it out there. They're chasing tiny bait. Look at that little BFS crank. He's awesome. So, and I say BFS crank. You guys know that I love BFS gear. Really gotten into it in recent years. And that's basically bait casters that can throw ultra light baits where traditionally we would need a spinning rod. In fact, let me pour these off here. This is one of my BFS crank boxes. I'll just show you. The Megabass Z1s, the little Rapala ultralights, and then these little Shimano, I call them my BFS crank, but little 39 size, the little guy. That's the same one I just had tied on. Ooh, sticky sharp hooks. I love those little tiny crankbaits, absolutely love them. But this Macbeth line, across the board, they're silent. And with the exception of the flat side, which the flat side is obviously tighter actioned, the rest of them are a wide wobbling, very aggressive, balsa-esque bait. They're plastic baits, they're not balsa, but they have that similar roll and movement to them, but they're silent baits. It's a really, really neat line of baits. The three that jump out to me, the BFS crank, which I fish a ton. It's the perfect size, perfect depth for fishing a lot of our East Tennessee little rivers and creeks and stuff, which is where I like to do a lot of that BFS cranking. And then the flat side, which I have just trashed fish on. And that one has some tech in it. It's got a weight transfer that really makes it easier to cast that bait long distances. And then that shallow. We're always looking for more shallow crankbait options. And these all have excellent stock hardware. I'm changing no hardware on any of them, just going out and fishing with them. They've been hard to get. They've been in limited supply. Maybe some of them will be in stock, maybe they won't. As you guys know, down in the video description, I'll link all this gear, rods, reels, baits, all of it for you. So check and see if any of them are in stock. If not, you can pre-order them. They've been coming and going a bunch in just small batches, and I've been scooping up what I can. One more hard bait, and then we'll shift over to swim baits and soft baits. This is the Spro Spin John 80. And these are my two favorite colors. That's why I'm holding up two. This little pink herring guy, and then that matte shad. But this is one of those categories that we have neglected on the channel somehow. At some point, we owe you a couple of in-depth videos. We owe you an in-depth spybait video. We owe you an in-depth scrounger video. We'll get to those one of these days, but today we're just talking about this one. So this little spin is a really unique spybait. Sorry I had to pause. We had a boat come in here, drive right on top of us and flip a U-turn. I'm about to get hit with all the waves from it, but this little guy right here is a really unique spin bait, or spybait, if you will. The spybait is a category I don't talk about a lot, but I do a lot of at certain times of year. The spybait, if you're not familiar with it, it's a sinking bait with a small prop on the front and the back. When you throw them out and just let them sink, they rock on their way to the bottom. When you steady retrieve them, they also have a tiny bit of rock, and then the props spinning at the front and back. You fish it at similar times to, say, a 2.8 Kitech or little cool baits underspin. It's very finessey. I throw it on a lot of 5, 6, 7 pound fluoro, typically spinning gear, but it will get bit when they just don't want to eat other things. It works well too when you would throw a jerkbait. But for whatever reason, today they just don't seem to want the jerkbait, even though they should. Try a spybait. That's sort of the category where it plugs in. This particular one, the Spro, the blades are all black. So instead of chrome, they're black. That's unique, less flash. And then it comes with excellent hardware, the best hardware of any spybait or spin bait that I have used. And this year in particular, I latched onto this Spro. I carried them in my box for a long time, and I just played with them here or there. I don't know what triggered me one day to tie this one on instead of another, but I did, and man, I have opened up on them. So many fish and so many big ones on it. And that was, even though it's been in my box for a while, it's not a brand new bait, but we've never talked about it before, and that's how it found its way into this gear review. Some of this stuff is like that. Some of it's brand new, some of it's not, but we're talking about it for the first time because it's had an impact on our fishing now. So this little guy went from riding in my Spybait box to being the Spybait that I choose first every time, and that is a huge, huge deal. So don't overlook that bait. It has swiveling hangers front and back. There's just a lot of tech in it, but I'm telling you, I have crushed them on it, and that's really what you need to know. If you're out on a Spybait bite, that guy in one of these two colors just catches fish. All right, swim baits. I've got two for you, both on the small end of the spectrum. This guy, the Big Bite Baits B5. It's a line through swim bait. So you put your line through the nose, it comes out the belly, you tie it to the hook, and then you take the hook and you insert it in the belly of the bait, and that's where it rides. What's the deal with this bait? I'm just gonna flat say it. I overlooked this one. I've had them for a long time. I saw them in the package, they looked good enough to buy them, but I just never put the time into them. You know, you have confidence baits. You have those baits that you always reach for. And this just wasn't a bait that I had reached for at the right time. Well, this spring, I was on a bite. I needed a smaller swim bait, started tearing my boat apart, and I had two of these in the boat. And I'm like, yeah, let's try it. Oh my goodness, had I overlooked this bait. There probably will never be a swim bait video going forward that this bait isn't included in. I have destroyed them on it. It is a budget-friendly bait. It is a gear-friendly bait. So the B5, it's not particularly huge, right? It's bigger than a 4.8 Kitech, but it's not giant by any means. You're able to throw it on totally regular gear. It's a size 4 treble hook. That's the same size treble hook as on most of these crankbaits. As a result, you can throw it on completely normal jig rod, a fluke rod, a topwater rod, right? I've been using, there's a Gamakatsu rod that I reviewed in a gear review earlier this year. And it had a regular action, which is sort of a JDM name for an action, but a very all-around rod. 7-foot, medium heavy Gamakatsu. That rod, I happened to have it in the boat that same day, spooled with 12-pound fluoro. Not what I would normally call swim bait line, right? I'm that guy who goes overkill. 8-foot rods, 80-pound braid, 35-pound leader, big swim bait, because when I hook up, I want to know I'm landing that giant. Complete other end of the spectrum here. Clear water. Do you get a lot of followers on a swim bait but can't get them to convert? You can go to that B5, which has a great tail kick, a great body roll. The speed, the retrieve is just slow. Slow roll it. Cast it out, slow roll it. Don't be afraid to throw it on light line. 12-pound line, 15-pound line, anywhere in there on that lighter rod. Again, it's only a size 4 hook. Now, you can upgrade the hook. I swap them out for an ST36, so a 3X size 4. In fact, I'll bet I do. I have one laying here. So that's the stock hook. I go to a 3X version. This is the ST36 by owner. But that hook, I can set it all day long on a 7-foot medium heavy. No problem. It's line through, so when you hook up, bait goes up the line and you're fighting the fish on just the treble hook. That is key. The hook up to land ratio is incredible. This is gonna sound crazy, and at some point it will change. At some point I'll lose a fish. I've caught dozens of fish on this bait, and I have never lost a fish after I hooked them. Period. Every fish that's ever eaten it and I've fully loaded up on them and I've got them, 100% of them have come in the boat. That's the power of a line through and a soft rod. And normally you can't put soft rod and swim bait together. This is a unique bait. I'm able to get a ton of bites on it. I can throw it on lighter tackle. I can convert fish in clear water. It's a winner, and it's cheap. How about that? I mean, I'm not sure there's a better list of things to lead up to any bait, right? Very impressed with that guy. Here's another one for you. This one has had a ton of chatter online. The Megabass Sleeper Gill. You guys know how much we like the dark sleeper. The dark sleeper is just one of those baits that we crush with, absolutely crush fish. We catch giant smallies on them, we catch big largemouth on them. We throw them all over the country. They shine when we're up north. Boy, do they shine. It's my favorite bait when I'm in the northern half of the country. But they work everywhere. Well, they came out with a gill. Little size comparison for you. The sleeper gill is a neat bait. So it's the same concept. The top fin completely hides the hook, okay? And the hook is very well hidden in there. But the body, this lower section of the body here, is hollow. It collapses out of the way of that hook. So there's still great hook exposure when you collapse the bait. This bait gets bit. I've put a bunch of time into it already, and it gets bit. I have crushed skipping it under trees and back up in laydowns where I can't put any other bait. I've done really well with that little guy. Obviously, it's a bluegill imitator. It's a given. It's going to be amazing on ponds, shallow grass lakes, right? You know where to throw a bluegill imitator, but it is a killer little swim bait. Now, here is one modification that is going to help you a ton. If you want to hook more of your bites, grab a pair of scissors. See where this hook is in this cavity. Right here at the front of the cavity is solid. I'm gonna take my scissors and I'm just gonna split the fin the rest of the way, about a 1/4 inch there. So now it's not solid in front of the hook. See, I opened those two little edges up, and that has made a big difference for me. Hooks up even better. Overall, killer bait, great price, great colors. It comes in a ton of colors. It's a really good option. And yes, I would say it should be added to the arsenal. It's a killer option. I'm really happy with that bait. All right, with that, let's transition over to the soft baits. First up, Nichols tapeworm. Some baits, when you see them, just look amazing on the shelf. This, to me, not one of those baits. This is one of those baits that was designed to catch fish, not fishermen. So here they are in the package. The Nichols tapeworm. They come in a, I'll bet that's a 7. Is it 7? Yeah, 7-inch and a 10-inch. Yeah, 10-inch. Both are really good sizes. The bait fishes much smaller than it is. So the first couple of inches of the bait is a traditional round worm so that it will hold a hook. Everything after that is completely paper thin on one side. And then it's just truly straight. This is not a curly tail worm. It is a straight worm that is incredibly thin. The action of this worm, some baits catch fishermen, some baits catch fish. The action of this worm is amazing. It's not a curly tail worm. We'll call it like a ribbon tail. When you pop this thing on the bottom, I like to be more aggressive with it. If you sit and shake it, you get this amazing shimmy out of the thin section of the worm. If you pop it, it has this incredible ribbon-like movement in the water. It looks so good. Don't be afraid of the 10-inch size, because the worm itself is so thin. I mean, it just balls up to nothing, right? Look how little plastic is actually in that worm, because it is so paper thin over much of the worm. Same thing with the 7. I mean, it just goes down to absolutely nothing. It's an amazing, amazing bait. It's one of those that I was smart enough to buy, but it took me a while to actually put the time in to take it out, rig it up, and then go, oh man, I've been blowing it. Just incredible action on this bait, and definitely worth picking up, especially on a summer worm bite. I mean, this is prime time. Rig it on a shaky head, rig it on a Texas rig, but rig it so that the hook point comes out of the same side as the flat of the worm. So not where the worm is going to be the thin way. You don't want the hook to come out in line with the thin. You want it to come out in line with the flat side. That way, when you hop the worm, you get that ribbon action out of it, where it's just flowing and moving every time you work it. If you rig it the other way, you kill all that action. You need that flat side to be moving as you're working it. Next up, a little Spro. This is the CJ Smasher. There have been so many Ned baits that have come out in the last few years. So many. But I really like this one. They've done a very good job because it's finessier than almost all of the other baits. It comes in, let me show you the design. I grabbed 3 really good colors here. It's a round worm, tapers way down, and then has a flat paddle tail on the end. It's a stretchy material, okay? So a very forgiving bait. You can catch a ton of fish on them. Here's the deal. It is smaller than almost every other Ned bait I've seen. It's a very, very finessey profile. So you're gonna throw it on your smallest Ned hooks. And I'll link a really good hook for that in the video description with the bait. Because even a traditional Ned will be a big hook in this bait. So it's truly downsized, which is really good. You get a ton of action out of that little flat tail if you just sit there and shake it a little. And then the colors are, I have no idea if this is gonna do any justice to the colors, but the colors are excellent. That's a green pumpkin with an ultra fine purple flake in it. That one is a two-toned, almost like a sexy shad type color with a little gold flake in it, silver flake in it, mated up to a clear with a fine purple dust in it. I mean, really good colors in a really good size with really good action. And they'll last a long time too. I mean, really, they did a good job with that one. Next one up, Netbait and STH. You guys know we love the STH plastics. We throw the tube, the 4-inch tube, the 2.5-inch tube that we just crush them with. The little STH drop shot baits have incredible colors. They're ultra soft. You also know we reviewed Bait Fuel, that scent that came out earlier this year. We already reviewed that, and I have really good things to say about that scent. I have never been a scent guy because I felt like scent was a scam, but there are only a couple of companies that have ever taken a truly scientific approach to scent. Berkeley took a scientific approach, and now American Baitworks has taken a scientific approach, where you're talking about partnering up with colleges or universities and laboratories and creating scent based on how bass feed, the actual things they want to eat and hold on to. So much technology in that Bait Fuel scent, where most scents are just designed to catch fishermen. This is the first bait that they've come out with Bait Fuel impregnated into the bait. So this is called the flat-sided shad. This is the 3.5. There's a 4.5 also. I didn't even grab the 4.5 today, but 3.5, there's a 4.5, 5.5. The 5.5 sounds like a big bait, but when you take this flat-sided shad and turn it sideways, they're extremely thin. So even the 5.5 is not a big bait. But they've done a great job here, because the 3.5, to me, size 2 nose hook, perfect smallmouth bait. Absolutely perfect smallmouth bait. And we have mowed fish down on it already. Just absolutely mowed them down. It's got great movement in the water. It's got that bait fuel already in it. It's got traditional colors, and it works. It just flat catches fish. I caught a fish on it the very first cast, which is a really good start when you're starting to experiment with a bait. And then it's just been fun from there. And then the 4.5 is a great all around. And then I'm really glad that they did a 5.5, because STH is a Canadian company, so obviously the bulk of fishing is going to be designed around smallmouth. But by adding a 5.5, I mean, they've created a true nationwide bait, right? A bait that you can drop shot in Florida or Texas or California or anywhere in the South and fish for big largemouth, but it's still plenty small to catch spots and smallmouth. Just a really, really good design. It's a simple design, but you rig it, you don't rig it this way, or at least I don't. I like to rig it flat with a nose hook, and then you get a ton of action as you work that bait. You get a lot of flow and movement out of it. It's a really good option. Now, last but not least, we've got a bait called the Frilled Shad by Deps. Again, one of those baits that I've just sort of been sitting on. It's been in my back pocket. So a little backstory. Scroungers are another bait genre that we owe you an in-depth rabbit hole type video on, and at some point we'll do it. But the scrounger is just incredibly effective here on the Tennessee River. Really, they're incredibly effective everywhere. But the big scrounger, like a 1/2 or a 3/4 head, big hook, big bait, like a big Spro, like that one, I just pound fish on these things. I also pound fish by downsizing, going to like the 1/2 ounce Davis baits or a 3/8 ounce, pairing that up with like a super fluke. I crush them on that. But just like with swim baits, you guys know we talk finesse swim baits. There's a time and a place for a 2.8 Kitech. There's a time and a place for a 4.8 Kitech. There's a time and a place for a big swim bait. Same thing with scroungers. Sometimes they want that big full body scrounger. Sometimes they want a fluke. Sometimes they won't eat any of that. And they won't eat a swim bait either. There's bass blowing up. I throw a scrounger, won't touch it. I pick up a Kitech, won't touch it. I throw it on an underspin, won't touch it. That's where this Frilled Shad comes in. So it's like a scrounger, but it's built into the bait itself. Can you see that? Crazy looking little head design. And then it's got a completely flat fork tail on it. A very unique soft plastic from Deps. I just rig it up on a ball head. This is the exact head that I've been rigging it on. But you just throw it out and slow roll. Slow is key. If you go too fast, it'll sort of mute the action. The bait is so soft, and that little soft bill is obviously soft. So it'll sort of collapse and stop working. So you throw it out and you just slow roll. And it's got this subtle shimmy, subtle little forky tail kick, and they will mow that thing down when they won't hit other baits. And you can get super subtle. I mean, this is my main color, but you can even go literally clear, just clear. You talk about subtle. When they were, for whatever reason, if they're chasing little bait fish, little bait have tight action. So you throw a Kitech at them with that big wide kick, won't touch it if they're really finicky. I'll switch over to like a Largo Shad. Sometimes I can convert them on that. Sometimes I can't. This is another option for those fish that have seen it all, but they're chasing bait and you want to catch those fish. This little guy on a ball head is a really unique option. And it's a fish catcher. And with that, we wrap up today's gear review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully there's something here that will help you in your fishing. Whether that's a budget rod or reel, whether that's a unique soft plastic, a new crankbait, a new swim bait. Hopefully something in here, something in all the time we put on the water jumps out and will help you catch more fish this year. In the video description, I'll link all of it in the order that it appeared to make it easy for you to find. And then again, if there's a hook upgrade, if there's a specific head, particular colors, we'll link all that there for you as well to really help you guys out as you dial in your fishing. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.